Okay. Hello again, everyone. My name is Gershma Kaur, she, her pronouns. I'm the first speaker from Berkeley on affirming the resolution that universal preschool ought to be considered a human right. In the premises of this round, ought is considered ought proposes that this is a value round, and the value that we propose here is that of opportunity. Human right is defined as a right that is believed to belong justifiably to every person, and the government's burden for this round is to prove that this is a human right under the value proposed, which is value of opportunity, and opposition's burden is to negate that. Contention one for this round is that of level playing field. Subpoint A, there are a lot of benefits to childcare. Research shows that kids who attend preschool may have higher math and reading skills, are better prepared for kindergarten, behave better, and are more likely to graduate college. So right off the bat, based on this analysis, you see that like having access to preschool just gives people a long run benefit of like that lasts up to like into their teen and adulthood years when they go on to attend college, right? Because what preschool does is it sets up children for like fundamental basic mannerisms and basic like gives them basic developmental abilities that they can take a long way into the future, right? And not attending preschool can lead to the children being very quiet and antisocial from like very young ages, because they can be afraid of being in a room with so many children and also being told what to do by someone that isn't one of their like parents or guardians, right? And this is seen when people enter kindergarten, and little children can like have these certain tendencies where they're either quiet, they're nervous, they cry about like being away from their parents because they aren't used to something like that. And it can cause issues because children who don't go to preschool have not gotten to develop that before they enter kindergarten and join a big group sort of setting with many children, right? Preschool provides the opportunity for children to learn social skills, right? They learn cooperation because when they are in a group of other children, they are probably going to be less like likely to they're going to learn how to sort of share, like little kids learn about sharing, they learn about how to be nice people, they learn about empathizing, and these are very important skills. And we believe that preschool, starting them off at preschool instead of directly sending children into kindergarten where they're in a large classroom setting with many other kids, can be beneficial at teaching them these basic things that make them better little humans, right? We want our kids to be qualified, them to like understand basic human values. Subpoint B under this contention is that of exacerbating the wealth gap. And so what this is about is like you're developmentally setting back your child when they do not attend preschool, right? This means that children become ill prepared for it, and there are direct impacts to cognitive abilities of preschool and kindergarten children. Children are learning, questioning, forming spatial relationships, problem solving, imitating, and like all of these other things like memorizing, number sense, classification, right? Symbolic play. They're taught these basic things by preschool, right? Through like games and like all these other learning opportunities that preschools can provide for children, right? And when children don't get to experience this because of the financial situation of their family, they are being set back, right? These are skills that are now impoverished, that impoverished families don't have access to, right? To provide their children with these skills necessarily, because they lack the ability to like provide preschool to their for their children, right? Meaning their ability to have a proper education is worsened. So what we see is that education access and resource access is the key to being able to advance in life, because you're already set back at birth if you're born into an impoverished family. And this is just like a straight fact, right? Like we see that in real life. The only way to escape poverty is proper development and a resource access and the opportunity to be able to advance in life, which comes through education. And universal preschool would help level the playing field and make sure we're not further setting back impoverished people when they're literally like toddlers or infants at like ages of 2-4, right? Impacts of this are advancing education access, creating better quality of life and opportunity for low-income people. And contention to impacts to parents, where I get a little bit more in depth about the low-income parents, right? So in a childcare, right? Parents experiencing average wages have to work all day now, 9 to 5s, and 9 to 5s happen to be the most common jobs, right? And this in status quo, 64% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. The average tuition of preschool happens to be $10K per year, right? Now, majority of Americans that are living paycheck to paycheck do not have 10K at their disposable income, like spend on preschool, right? In status quo. And most Americans also don't have enough income to like have like very highly skilled babysitters for their children, or have like homeschooling for their children, or have like just afford other forms of like daycare or childcare, right? Most Americans don't have that type of income in status quo. This means that not only are children being set back developmentally due to poverty, parents are also lacking the ability to adequately care for their children in terms of just being able to afford someone to watch the kids while parents work. And this is worsened in status quo because our many job positions do not provide a long enough maternal or paternal leave to parents, right? They do not have in our country, in status quo, we don't give that right to people. And so parents have this huge sort of stress about like what their kid, like how to provide for their kid, and they come under financial, of course, because they want to provide the best for their kid and have them be like at a level playing field. But this just becomes impossible when there's this financial like already like financial instability. And then this impacts the mental health of parents. Subpoint B is about the mental health impacts for parents. Because this increases this parent stress because your child isn't in preschool, and parents now have the burden of filling around 5 hours of childcare with limited resources. These parents may have to lower their income further to spend work time with their children, or cause them to spend money they don't have, increasing stress, right? And this is an extremely real thing that we see in status quo. And also the burden of fulfilling all of the developmental needs that this child cannot access through pre-K in status quo, because they can't access pre-K because of this poverty in status quo, right? And overall, the impacts come down to universal, like by going through with the government's proposed plan, which is that of universal preschool. Oh yeah, it's Valley Round. But by following the resolution for government, we say that universal preschool gives people opportunity to give their child the best developmental opportunities, right? It has the opportunity to work while not being worried, stressed about their kids, right? And this is overall the opportunity that we advocate for, and this is what makes preschool a human right, because everyone needs to have this this opportunity in their life. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. If everyone's ready, I'll do the first speech for op team. Perfect. For a quick off-time roadmap, I'm going to talk about framework, then I'll talk about op contentions, and then I will get into the gov's case. You can start my 8-minute time in 3, 2, 1. So we agree with most of Gov's framework, including that this is a value round. The only thing we disagree with is their actual value of opportunity, and we propose the alternate value of net benefits, which is the most amount of good for the most amount of people. This includes opportunity. We think it's too narrow to only care about opportunity. We should be looking at more things, and we should evaluate what is the most amount of good for the most amount of people, not solely opportunity. That said, I believe we are able to win in the Gov world with their value of opportunity, so it's judges' preference for what they want to prefer. Moving on to the op side of this debate. Instead of universal preschool, the US and other countries ought to provide free preschool only to low-income families. Again, both teams agree this is a value round, so this is not a counter plan. It is merely an observation that there are alternatives to this resolution, and countries like the US and all other countries do not have to do universal preschool. There are other things they can do, such as, again, providing education to low-income families only. The rest of my speech will be spent talking about why these alternatives are a better choice and how we should, in fact, not be considering universal preschool a human right and not be giving it to everyone, but again, be giving it selectively to lower income communities. Our first contention is that equity is better than equality. We should have programs to support preschool for low income families, but again, it should not be universal. Rich people can afford to pay for their own preschool, because in the Gov world, when it's universal, regardless of your income, the government is giving you free preschool. To go over some terms briefly, which I don't think the teams are going to disagree about, but universal means affecting everybody. Given to every single family in the United States is free preschool regardless of their income. And having it being a human right means it's guaranteed by the government to all people, as in the government is providing free preschool to every single family in the United States. That is massively inefficient and it is not equitable. We need to redistribute the wealth in this country and allow low-income families to break cycles of poverty. They are the ones who are in need, and they are the ones who are going to be given free preschool. But it should not be to everybody. It should not be to the rich people that already have money and do not need government assistance. First subpoint here is that it would a wider focus, giving it to everybody, having it be universal, would lower the quality of education. By making preschool universal, every county would be given like at least one preschool. There'd be preschools everywhere. They would all be essentially run or paid for by the government. In Gov world, where this happens, where it's universal, it would lower the quality of education. Whereas in op world, only poor families would have access to free preschool, and there would be far less preschools. When the government has to focus on managing more preschools, there's less available resources and attention because it is distributed among more schools and more people. The impact of this is that when the government has to focus on, again, the impact of less resources is the quality of public preschool declines and children do not get the learning benefits associated with preschool. My opponent gives all these statistics for how preschool benefits like their reading scores and their access to college and all of those things. And that's in the status quo where preschool is not like at such a large scale, is not being run by the government and given to everybody. It's being given to some people. If it's universal, the government is giving it again to millions and millions of children. The quality will decline and those benefits will not be associated with preschool. Again, we need to give it to the people in need, not to people that are wealthy and can pay for their own preschool. Subpoint 2 of this contention is taxes. In the US, the upper and middle classes often don't pay their fair share of taxes. People that have money can hire consultants. They can find financial loopholes to get out of paying the amount of money they're supposed to. This means that a lot of the taxes are placed on the lower and middle classes, despite the bracket saying otherwise. But having universal preschool, there are a lot more people who'd be using this program, which means that the costs would be a lot higher. And that means that people of lower socioeconomic status are forced to pay taxes for something that they can get through cheaper government programs that are not universal. Because essentially the difference between giving preschool to only families that need it and giving it to everyone is what it comes down to is the poor people end up actually paying for rich people to send their kids to free preschool on behalf of the government, is essentially what's happening. So the impact of this second subpoint is essentially poor people having to pay taxes, or however my opponents would propose funding this, would have to pay more for rich people to send their kids to school when they can pay for it themselves. On to our second contention, which is excessive spending. Universal preschool, again, means that the government is paying for preschool for every single child in America. This would mean millions of children and billions upon billions of dollars. In contrast, only providing free preschool to low-income families would be significantly less expensive. The government spending billions of dollars would increase the money in circulation in the gov world where it's universal. This would result in consumers having more money to be able to spend, to purchase, and it would ultimately devalue the US dollar. Massive government spending would make an already overheated economy even hotter and would increase inflation from higher points than it is now. The terminal impact of this is it increased the cost of goods and increases, especially for people of lower socioeconomic status, are now unable to pay for basic necessities like food, water, fuel, housing, because inflation is increased because of this massive government spending. I'm sure my opponents will come up here and say that government spending doesn't drive inflation. It absolutely does. It is not the only factor, but it is a piece of the puzzle, and this would be an enormous spending package which would further drive up rates of inflation and the cost of goods. Now on to the government case. I'll start with their first contention, which is about learning. And essentially what we're going to say here is I agree with all of these points. I agree that preschool is beneficial. I agree it has good learning outcomes and pushes people into college. And I support lower income people being provided with free preschool because they should have that opportunity just like everyone else. What I take issue with is this universal word, which again means every single person is getting preschool, which is unnecessary and expensive and is actually going to ultimately hurt those low income communities instead of specifically targeting them, which is a far better alternative. Similarly to their second contention, talking about the importance for talking about the importance of preschool for low-income families, I again absolutely agree. Low-income families should have access to preschool, and that's why they should be targeted specifically and instead of this blanket universal system. Again, we'll get like a better quality of education if the government isn't providing it to everybody. If it's focusing on less schools and providing free education to less people, it'll be a better quality of education. There'll be more resources available, more attention. It'll actually help poor people to have the focus be smaller and not be universal, but just be targeted to low-income families in low-income areas. Really, the same thing goes for like all of the subpoints and all these contentions. It's the same thing, like talking about parent mental health. Of course, we want to support parent mental health. That's why we want to give free preschool to low-income people who actually need access to government assistance in this sector. So I've essentially covered all of Gov case. Again, we don't disagree that preschool is bad. We just disagree about who we're giving it to. So there's not a whole lot of clash there. So I'll just really briefly restate the contentions on the op team, and then I'll cede the rest of my time. Our first contention, again, is that equity is greater than equality. It's better to target this, give it to the people who really need it, and not be giving free preschool to rich people who can pay for it themselves. And our second contention was excessive spending, how we are spending more money than we need to. If we're giving it to everyone, if it's universal, we're spending more money, which means more money in circulation, which will overheat an already overheated economy and increase inflation. For those reasons, I urge a vote for the op team. Thank you.
All right. Oh, sorry. Okay. Member of government, and I'm going to start my speech of 8 minutes. I think TOC does like 15-second grace or something like that. But I'm just going to start my time now. I'm going to start on the framing of the round. I think just to make this round simple, we're just going to argue under both values because I think that makes the most sense currently. Now, going on to the opposition case, I'm going to start with this like alternative counter value, right? It's essentially a counter plan that can be allowed under a value round, right? So I'm just going to go into a few responses as to why the opposition plan is just not good, right? Okay, so the first things first, because they're not allowed to propose a counter plan, they cannot determine like specific wealth brackets and such, and therefore they can't say they will only provide it for low-income students. However, if we are functioning under the assumption that they can provide preschool only to low-income students, if you create a school that only poor people are allowed to attend, this is just going to create a large amount of polarization and division between low-income kids and high-income kids, right? This is quite literally bordering segregation because you are saying this is a school that only poor people are allowed to attend, and this is like the poor people school. That's so terrible. Not only is it terrible for the quality of life for the low-income students that are going to be going to this school, as well as the fact that we can assume that there's going to be some level of discrimination from this, right? Because like you're going to grow up, you're going to go to like elementary school and you just came straight out of the poor people school, right? Like this is probably going to create bullying issues as well. Like there's just so much polarization being created in the opposition world that we cannot function under the assumption that this plan is net beneficial or creating more opportunity than the government world. Also, another response to this plan, because no high-income people will be going to these schools, there won't be like any like donations or such. These schools will fully rely on government funding, right? Like we're gonna assume that like a bunch of rich people are gonna go to private schools anyways, right? Like if a parent can afford a $30K preschool tuition, they're gonna pay it, right? Because like rich people in the status quo, there's public high schools, there's private high schools. People pay for the private high schools when they have the money for it, right? However, people might also like attend these universal preschools because it's convenient, right? I mean, like this is very anecdotal, but my parents can afford a private school tuition. However, my school, Berkeley High, is walking distance from my house and it's extremely convenient. It's a great school. It has great programs. So I go to a public school, right? And I love it there. So like if low income, if like high income parents of high income children are going to these schools because they're convenient, that also means that they have disposable income to be able to donate to the schools, to be able to donate supplies, books, colors, like coloring material, to be able to supply like all sorts of things that maybe government spending won't cover. And this doesn't exist in the opposition world where they're literally creating a school that only poor people are allowed to attend, right? So moving on. They spoke about how like people can get out of paying taxes that go to universal preschool. So like poor people will carry the burden of paying taxes. First of all, because this is not a policy round, it's not a plan, we do not need to defend funding. And because like this alternative is so strange, it comes down to essentially like no education versus worsened education, because you literally have the school for like poor people, which is just incredibly strange. And however, we also believe that since all of this is value and theoretical, we can simply state that we also have an alternative and can fund it by taxing only high-income people, right? This is fully theoretical because this is a value round, and they cannot provide like a reason as to why only low-income people will have the burden of funding this through taxes, right? They simply cannot defend this. Their second contention, we seem to have missed the tagline. I'm sorry, I would have asked a POC if I noticed that. However, they state that like more money spent, there's more money spent if we try to give like there's a, sorry. Okay, they talk about the economy. However, the point is that this is a human right. So why should it be like a poor people only school, right? The entire reason that we stated all of these reasons as to why it is important for people to attend preschool, for children to attend preschool, it's with the sole purpose of the fact that it quite literally developmentally stunts children to not attend preschool. And that is a reason why it is a human right, because the wealth gap is severely exacerbated when children are not attending preschool, right? It is a human right because every child deserves to go to preschool. So it's not about like creating a school that only low-income people are allowed to go to. It is about acknowledging the fact that that preschool is incredibly, that as both teams concede, is incredibly important to the development of children, and therefore it is necessary that we consider it a human right, and that has not been contested by the opposition. Moving on to the government case, right? The first contention that we provide is a level playing field. Now, opposition comes in and they say that the issue is that the word universal is the issue. They say that argues that equity is better than like equality, essentially, right? However, judges, the equity that opposition is proposing is quite literally to take all the poor people and stick them into a school that's free, which is so polarizing. That is so polarizing, right? Rich people who have the income to pay for private school are going to go to private school regardless, maybe for like, like internal biases, like, oh, I don't want to stick my kid in a public preschool, right? Like we see that in the status quo, people pay for private high schools, even though there's public high schools, right? People pay for private middle schools, even though there's public middle schools. People pay for private elementary schools. I attended a private elementary school, right? However, if you have the disposable income, you might as well pay for a private school. But the only unique point here is the fact that you are not quite literally like, oh, I'm going to check your income, make sure you're poor enough to attend this school, completely polarizing, like, and creating a huge gap between poor people and like rich people, high income people and low income people, which is simply not going to create any solvency. It's not going to create equity. In fact, it is going to actively worsen equity. Now moving on, our supplement. Yeah.
I was just wondering, in your world, couldn't rich people still just go to their private school? Like, do they have to go to the public option?
Yeah. So I actually covered this already. Essentially, like as I stated, rich people can just go to private schools anyways, right? That's still going to exist, as I stated. However, the unique point is the fact that like in the opposition world, there is like going to be no like high income people attending the school because they're physically not allowed to. However, if a family wants to attend a universal school because it's maybe more easily accessible, maybe it's closer, maybe it's walking distance, maybe it's convenient, maybe they like the people, maybe they already know families that go there, right? There's a lot of reasons as to why a high income like family might go to a universal preschool, and those people actually have the income to be able to improve the preschool, right? Versus when you only have a school that has low income people and these parents are already like counting pennies, right? They're living paycheck to paycheck. They obviously like are putting their kids in this only poor kids school because out of desperation, right? Versus we are acknowledging that it is a human right for it to be universal. Now, our subpoint B was about how it exacerbates the wealth gap. Basically say that they would solve for this with like equity. We already explained why they won't. Our second contention was impacts to parents. We spoke about childcare. They said that we agree, so we want to give access to low-income people. However, again, their access is so messed up, like fundamentally messed up, right? You physically cannot live in a world where you're sticking like low-income students in a school and being like, no, you make too much money to go to this school. Like that's crazy. There's no world where this would exist. Obviously, we're not going to like argue like probability of this happening. We're going to function under the assumption that this would happen. And this is a fundamentally bad thing to happen, right? And for all those reasons, I urge a clear, strong government ballot. Proud to affirm. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. I'm going to be starting my 8-minute negation speech. I'm first going to be going over some of the framework in this debate. Next, I'm going to be talking about defending our 3 points. And then finally, I'm going to be attacking some of the claims that they make in their 2 points. So with that out of the way.
One sec, you're cutting out a
Sorry.
little bit. You might want to turn off video.
Okay, sorry about that. Can everybody hear me a little bit better now?
Yes.
Is that
Yes.
better? Okay, sorry about that. Okay, I've already said my off-time roadmap, so I'm going to be starting my time in 3, 2, 1, begin. So let's look at the framework here. What my partner and I are disagreeing with this resolution because we don't think that we should make this universal. We define universal as preschool is now provided to all children in the US. All children have equal access to preschool, and that's what we have a problem with. We go for we're in our world, we're leveling the playing field, versus in our opponent's world where we allow it for all. We're not doing that as well, and we're pretty much maintaining things as they are the same. A big point that they make is that we are segregating kids into poor schools and into rich schools. So first off, this isn't segregation. An equitable program doesn't equal segregation. When Lyndon Johnson made Medicaid, which gave minimal levels of healthcare to poor people, nobody like went up and said, "Oh my God, that's like income segregation. This is such an awful thing." No, they didn't, because that's not what we're doing at all. All we're doing is just allowing the government to provide a decent level of education for poor people. So for when they can go in the status quo to from having no education to some education, it's not segregation like our opponents are trying to point out. All we're doing is adding in another equitable governmental program that we've done in the past, stuff like Medicare, Medicaid, food stamps, things that work, and that's what we're doing. We're not advocating for segregation. So in our first contention, we talk about I'll take it if I can later. First off, I'm going to be talking about what they said to our first contention. Equity is better than equality. They say you can't determine what makes somebody low income. I don't know. I think this is like a pretty obvious point. Like it is easy to like you can just look at somebody's zip code. That's like a very easy thing to determine. 2, they say we make a world that causes segregation. I already responded to that. But even if we were somehow creating segregation, this point is completely non-unique because in our opponent's world, I'm going to take it after I finish the rest of this point. This point, as I was saying, this is completely non-unique because in the status quo, there are rich and poor segregated schools. Even if we were to go with our opponent's plan and make it universal, rich parents still send their children to private schools. Any points that they talk about segregation don't hold. This also applies to their points about bullying and discrimination. You don't really see bullying and discrimination happening right now for equitable programs. Like, I don't think that like somebody who's on food stamp is getting like made fun of and bullied by their peers. That thinking isn't happening. Like, again, all we're doing is just making another equitable program. And then finally, they say that because no high-income students are going to these schools, there's going to be no donations from the wealthy and the schools will fail. So first off, because this is an equitable program, we don't need donations in the first place. Things like Medicare don't get donations because they are only focused on the poor people. Now the government is solely focused on only providing almost done. You can get your POI in just a second. Now in the government world, in our world, the government is solely focused on helping schools provide for poor children. They don't need to worry about donations in the first place because we are not widening the focus and lowering the quality of education like we talk about, which actually went uncontested. They don't contest our subpoint B contention 1, Judge, which is very important. So consider that in the opponent's world, where there is universal education, widening this scope diminishes the quality of education. Now nobody gets as good of an education as our opponents are claiming, and the playing field is in fact not leveled. This is an important point. Don't let them respond to this because they could have in their first speech. They also, to talk about taxes, they say taxes don't matter. It's a wash. I think taxes do matter, but poor people will be having to pay more if there are more people included in this program. So I do think that taxes are an important thing. And yes, I can finally take your POI now, but I'm only going to take one.
Yeah, no, sorry. It passed. You can keep going with your speech. Sorry.
All right, moving on. They say it's too polarizing, but again, programs like equitable programs don't receive the ridicule that our opponents are trying to make it out to be. It's not polarizing. We already have programs like financial aid. We have affirmative action. We have programs that uplift disadvantaged people, and specifically disadvantaged people. These are things that exist. I don't think that this is going to be polarizing at all, just providing bare minimum levels of education for the people who need it the most. And then finally, they say to our excessive spending, contention number 2, they say that that in their world, they will only tax the rich instead, and they can just do that. So then all of our concerns about poor people having to pay more goes out the window. But I don't think it's that big of a jump in logic to say that rich people are greedy and they're going to try to avoid paying their taxes. We've seen this in the past, and we'll see it now. If it's universal, rich people, they're going to try and get out of their taxes. Now the poor people have to pay more money, versus in our world where they don't have to pay as much money. So now finally onto their 2 contentions. They talk about leveling the playing field. This is exactly why we need to go with our plan. We are leveling the playing field the best. Look at it from the perspective of affirmative action and financial aid from college. Only the people that need that are getting it. They were once disadvantaged, and now the playing field is being somewhat leveled. Versus in their world, now everybody gets it. Everybody has this program, and there is no leveling the playing field in the first place when it's something that everybody gets. So yes, now also they talk about child care and mental health in their second contention. We think that these are important things, but we disagree with them in the sense that we don't need to worry about the mental health of rich people, because they have the money to afford paying their children to do whatever they need to do, where we in our world can just be specifically focused on the people who need it. They say 62% of people living from paycheck to paycheck and they need help. Now we can cut out this 40% of people that don't need it and only focus on the 60%. We can better give them our time, our quality, and things can improve for them. Versus in their world, everybody gets less benefits and it's marginal at best. So in the end, we just make the playing field more equal. If that's what this debate is all about, then all we're doing is just providing another equitable program that just makes things better for everyone. It shouldn't be universal, and it shouldn't be universal, because it's just making things more unfair, and it's just maintaining the divisions we already have. So for all of these reasons, I urge a strong vote for my partner and I on the opposition.
All right, thank you very much. If everyone's ready, I'll give last speech for op team. Cool. For a quick off-time roadmap, I'm going to be going over some voter issues, and then I'll say why overall I think op team has won this debate. I'll start my 4-minute speech in 3, 2, 1. So the first voter issue I want to talk about is segregation/polarization, which is essentially all the points that op made against our suggestion for an alternative to universal childcare. So like every other governmental program, this is not different from any other governmental program to help poor people. We give examples of like Medicaid, food stamps, etc. People aren't going to like discriminate against people at a public school. They aren't going to be like marginalized or stigmatized. Like if we would see that in the status quo with other governmental programs if this was the case. Additionally, we aren't forcing anyone to go to a specific school. Anyone can go to whatever preschool we want. All we're advocating for is governmental programs that pay for preschool for people of lower income. We aren't like putting people in specific schools saying only you can go here, only you can go there. We are just paying for preschool for people who are of lower income. That is the providing. Go for it.
The original plan that the original like counter that the opposition provided was essentially universal preschool for low-income students, not paying them, giving them money so they can attend preschool.
Sure, I'll respond and then it's judge's discretion. Essentially, none of this matters because this is a value round. We are not proposing specific plans or counter plans. There are no plans. It is just the principle of providing governmental assistance to people of lower income instead of being universal. That's all that the op team is suggesting. It is not a specific plan because, again, it's a value round. All right, continuing. Even if what my opponent said was true and we were creating this polarization, it's non-unique. The exact same thing happens in both worlds. In GovWorld, all the rich people choose private schools instead of this universal public preschool, and then all the public preschools be quote unquote full of just poor people. The exact same thing happens. It's non-unique. The rich people will choose the better education, they'll go to their rich private school, and the public option that's quote unquote universal will only be the poor people. It's a non-unique point. It does not give ground to either side. On to the next voter issue, which is really the first reason for why you should vote op in this debate, is on quality of education. As my partner said, our opponents clean conceded our contention 1 subpoint B, which is that universal preschool would lower the quality of education. Again, in a world where the government provides preschool to literally everybody, the resources are strained, the focus is limited, and the benefits associated with preschool cease to exist. My opponent dropped this, so both judges must assume that this is 100% true. In the Gov world, strained resources mean that the education benefits associated with preschool no longer exist. So we can look at their contentions, all of like how they talk about how people that go to preschool go to college, they have higher like reading scores, all of that no longer matters because we made the point that making it universal would strain resources and those benefits would cease to happen, and they dropped it. They cannot talk about it later. It automatically flows to the op team. We win this point. They do not have any impacts. All of the impacts in their entire case are gone because they did not contest this point that it would pretty much erase the quality of education, the benefits of preschool. On to the final voter issue for why you should vote for op team. Again, another conceded point. The Gov entirely dropped our second contention, which is about excessive government spending. They didn't interact with any of this warranting whatsoever. They just said it wasn't important. They dropped all the warrants. They dropped all of the evidence. So I'll pretty much just restate what I talked about in this contention. Again, universal preschool would mean the government giving free preschool to every single person in this country, which would be incredibly expensive. It would cost more money than our plan. And as a result of this, it would increase inflation. Again, government spends more money. There's more money in circulation that leads to an increase in the price of products. Even if you judges as individuals don't think this argument is true and you don't buy this argument, it does not matter because the opponents did not drop it. They conceded the argument. Therefore, it is automatically true. Therefore, all of the impacts from this contention should be flowed to the op side, and really this contention by itself should be enough to win the debate. The government spends more money, the cost of good increases. Every single person in the United States has to pay more money for things like food, like fuel, like gas, and people of lower income, again, like talking about opportunity, talking about the people that need help most, those are the ones who are most affected by inflation. Those are the ones who struggle to get by because they're putting food on the table just became that much more expensive because inflation went up, or paying for gas to get to their minimum wage job just got that much harder because the cost of gas skyrocketed because of inflation. This is what happens in the Gov world, and it was conceded there was absolutely no interaction with this contention. So for those reasons, we have two clear voter issues for why you should vote for the op team, and the rest of this debate is essentially a non-unique wash. For that reason, vote for op. Thank you.
Okay.
Is your volume up?
Yeah, I'm turning it up. Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Grismer Kaur, last speaker. And for off-time roadmap, I will be starting with some refutations and then go into big picture weighing of both worlds. Starting my time now. Okay, so starting right at the top of their op rebuttal, they talk a lot about like this the idea of like segregation that was presented in our second speech, and they say that this is not a form of segregation because it's like not any different from other government programs like food stamps or healthcare, right? First observation here is that they're equalizing childcare to food stamps, right? That's like a really like these are two different things. First of all, food stamps does not equal like preschool and developmental things. Like this is like a different sort of like two different things that should not be connected. But the other thing that they're completely overlooking, right, in this in the premises of this round, is the fact that we mentioned 64% of people are living paycheck to paycheck. What does this mean, Judge? This means that when they propose this plan that low-income people are the only ones getting access to the school, they're overlooking the fact that 64% of people, only a small part is considered low income, and the rest of the 64% is considered like middle class, right? So what happens to the rest of the people stuck in between who are not high enough, who don't earn high enough incomes to afford private preschool, but they're also not considered low income as per legal standards, and so they can't access this universal health care. This is a very important point that the opposition completely overlooks. And if they are the ones to bring up net benefits, and we say that we can argue under both the value of opportunity and the value of net benefits, then we clearly win on this point alone, that net benefits should consider every person, not just select and choose the people who we deem need it the most, right? And they also, okay, the other observation was this, and other point of where like second speaker from the opposition side uses this certain terminology about like zip code can determine wealth, which was basically that is literally, quite literally, like what segregation is. That is like the premises of zoning, redlining, and like the premises for segregation. And so it was actually not very far-fetched of my partner to in their speech to mention that this sounds a lot like segregation, because it literally does. When we are talking about equality and when we are talking about providing access to a human right, we cannot be picking and choosing people based on their zip codes or their low income levels to see if they deserve this human right. Everyone considered a human right? And that is why we believe that the government plan is simply the better plan in this round, because we provide for everyone. We don't leave a chunk of the population without access to universal preschool, right? And then, okay, so onto the voter issues. One of the biggest points that this round comes down to is like level the playing field, and we're arguing essentially who is doing this job better. Level the playing field, literally, basically, we're talking about equality, right? And government is providing equality in this round. When we talk about leveling the playing field, we're saying that we give access to those who don't have access, and this happens to be that whole chunk. 64% of people who are living paycheck to paycheck and cannot afford $10K on childcare a year, right? We are leveling the playing field because of unique impacts, right? And when they decide to leave certain populations out of it and they pick and choose who gets access to this, they're not leveling the playing field. They're just like focusing their focus on like certain people, and then there's still a group in the middle who still doesn't get the same access. Versus we can avoid all of that complicated mess and just give universal access to everyone, and that's how you give true equality in the system, right? Also, the one important factor is that this is like a value round, right? And opposition's burden, as we stated at the beginning of the round, was to prove that like they needed to negate if this is like a human right, or like, you know, they needed to negate our contention, and they don't fulfill their burden because considering that this is a value round, they don't interact with what it means to be a human right. That's what we proposed. We said that we are arguing that this is a human right. That's why we presented all of our analysis on why preschool is good and why it should be considered a human right. That's what we were supposed to be arguing. And the opposition simply diverged from that path and did not fulfill the burden that was on them, right? And overall, if we do big picture weighing of both sides, the government world gives you benefits of like, we give access to every single person in United States to have universal preschool, right? And to say that, oh, there was like a bunch of refutations and stuff about like the potential quality. We said that like rich people still get these like, rich people should also have access to the universal system, because maybe it's just more convenient for like, even if you're rich and you can afford to put your student in a private school, maybe you just think it's better for your child to have a more economically diverse group of people that they interact with in their developmental years, so they don't grow up to be little entitled children who don't realize the value of like, or the background that other people are coming from, and they realize how to interact with other people better, right? We gave these points. Point of order, okay.
Yeah, the point about benefiting rich people to be in a more like diverse or lower economic standing is a new point and shouldn't be considered.
I believe that this was brought up in my first speech when I gave all the analysis on teaching children social skills, cooperation, and this is an extension of the point that my partner made in their second speech about how rich people they can have a bunch of reasons as to why they might want their child to be in.
Examples are allowed. The
Yeah.
argumentation that rich people are incentivized to use universal preschool was already made extensively when I gave my speech, and then extended when
You're
you
muted.
me.
You're muted, by the way.
No, I thought because you were.
Oh, okay, yeah, okay. Hopefully they heard that. Okay, I'm gonna unpause. I had like 5 seconds on the clock. Anyways, I'm resuming my time. For all these reasons, I urge a strong ballot for the government because we give the best of both worlds for every person in status quo. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. Good debate.
Thank you so much.
Good round.
You guys so much you don't understand. You're like the nicest person in team. You're just really chill. You never play dirty. Like you're just a vibe.
No, I love all the Berkeley teams. We get along great.
And you all debate well, so thank you. If you give us about, I usually need about 10 minutes to get through my flow because I'm slow. So if you just bear with us, and we'll come back and disclose.
Okay.
Thank you.
Are there 3 judges in this room right now?
Someone's recording.
Someone's recording.
Okay, my bad. I thought there were going to be 3 ballots for a sec, but that's fine.
think we have a decision?
Yes, I think we're both submitted.
Cool.
Malcolm, you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, guys, great round. You all did a great job. I ended up siding with op. I had 3 voting issues. I think the first ones, I'll try and keep it brief. I think the first one was the level playing field issue. You know, from SciGov, I get very good, like long-term holistic reasons for why, you know, universal pre-K is good for everyone. And from the op side, you know, I get a consistent, like, you know, hey, you know, rich people can and already do pay for that. A real, you know, UPK doesn't necessarily level the playing field. It gives rich people maybe more advantage than they already have. I think then on the second voting issue was a segregation/polarization point. I think from the jump, I didn't really buy it. I thought that there could have been some more stronger warranting on that point, on that issue. I think OP did give multiple examples for why this program would be similar to other social programs like Medicare, Medicaid, financial aid, food stamps, etc. So I did buy that. I also thought that the quality of education / taxes, oh, sorry, let me pull up my notes. I also thought that the quality of education / taxes, I think ops analysis of like more pre-K equals less resources to go around, and also an increase in taxes, which will hit the poor people hardest because the rich don't pay their taxes anyway. I thought that this wasn't really adequately responded to. It flowed more or less throughout the round. But yeah, like I said, it was a very close round. I thought that, you know, if government had collapsed earlier on UPK as like a baseline human rights with the adequate warrants, I think, you know, I might be more persuaded to the side gov. But yeah, those are my voting issues and arguments.
Yeah, so I voted the opposite way. So I voted for Gov, and I think they're all legitimate points. I think the thing that sort of twisted it for me was in the Gov conclusion, sort of basically made the point that that targeting just at the poor is going to leave out people in the middle. That it's that the targeting is going to be incomplete, and you're going to have it fall apart. So I think that was sort of where the warranting, or not warranting, but that's sort of where that argument kind of played for me. I agree about the 3 voting issues, and I think that I just felt that on the other issues it was a little more of a wash between the 2 sides. I think generally, both sides sort of lost a little bit sight of the premise of the motion being more about a universal I think everybody got bogged down on whether or not preschool is universal as opposed to whether or not preschool is a universal right. And I think Gov would have had a stronger argument if they had argued that about it as opposed to the mode of it being delivered. But yeah, well argued on both sides. And it was fun. Thank you.
Guys, I've got a question of the judges.
Yes.
I was just wondering where you both come down on like the op giving an alternative to the resolution or the counter plan thing. At least to me, like it's incredibly unclear what is allowed in value rounds and what makes it different from policy. I was wondering if you two had any thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, with my paradigm, I mean, even when it comes to theory, like it's whatever, like I'm gonna let whatever, you know, like y'all can, like, I'm not very much a stickler for, you know, when it comes to like, you know, issues of value or theory or things like that. So yeah, that was fine.
Yeah, me too. I'm sort of, if saying that it's a value round and then arguing with making other arguments doesn't sort of matter to me if they're effectively countered. So yeah, I was sort of felt flexible about that.
Okay, thank you.
So it was fun. Good luck, everybody. Thank you.
Good luck. Thank you, judges.
Great job, guys.
Oh,
Did he leave?
Did he leave?
He's still showing up on my screen.